Hi everyone, welcome to the channel today. I appreciate your tuning in. If you are new to the channel, I am all about sewing, design, pattern making, and also embroidery. I've got quite a few videos showing embroidery on my Brother PRS 100, the machine that you see in the corner over here. So what I'm working on today is I have my basic skirt pattern here, and I actually have it drafted where it's easy for me to make changes based on having a straight skirt, a tapered or pencil shaped skirt, or a flared A-line skirt. And this is my back skirt sloper as well as the front skirt sloper or pattern block, however you refer to it. So what I'm going to do is just to do a mock-up before I decide to make the skirt. I just want to test the fit of this skirt sloper, and I'm going to turn that into a pattern of my liking and test the fit with muslin. If you've ever worked with muslin, it's just a woven fabric is what I typically use to make my mock-ups. So this, of course, you would use for something that's not a stretch or a jersey material. You want to use something of a similar weight when you sew up your pattern. So I'm going to use muslin for this mock-up. So the first thing I'm going to do is to lay out my pattern piece same as if I was laying it out on my regular fabric. So I'm going to start with the back. In the back, I'm going to probably have a zipper in the back, but with this mock-up, I'm just going to go ahead and cut it into two pieces for the ease of fitting. So I'm going to lay that out, and I'm going to do the same for the front. Let's make some room. I've got all this stuff on my cutting table from making the pattern. So I should have cleaned that up first. So let me get some of this out of the way. So that I can open up the muslin. And I think this muslin, it's probably only about 36 inches. I do have a wider muslin, but again, for the purposes of what I'm doing for this mock-up, this should be sufficient. So once I have everything laid out, I'm going to take my front piece, and the front I'm going to cut on the center fold. So I'm going to place that all the way to the edge of the fold of my fabric as I'm doing my basic skirt. And this is about 24 5/8 of an inch in length for both of these. Alright, so I usually like the pattern weight, and I usually just get these at your hardware store or the big box hardware stores. I'm going to lie that out at my hem and also at my waist. And I'll put one at the hip line, and then I'll put just a couple in the middle. Alright, so now what I typically do next is to trace out or trace around the skirt. So I like to start at the hem. So I'll make a mark at the base of the hem and a couple across. So I work my way around. And again, this will be for the straight skirt that I'm testing. So I'm going to stop at the line of the straight skirt. So what I probably should have done is took my sloper pattern or my sloper block and folded. I could have traced this 3 times, one for the straight, one for the tapered, and one for the A-line, but that's just going to take up more room. So I tend to hang them on a door stopper in my studio, just behind the door. I have several patterns just hanging there. That's easiest for me to keep it organized and to keep them nice and neat and usable. You also want to make sure that you are keeping your grain line straight with the lengthwise grain of your fabric which is back here, the lengthwise grain of the fabric, that non-stretchy part of the fabric. Okay, so let's start over. So once I'm gonna make sure it's centered with my grain line, I want to make my mark all the way over to the straight skirt, where the straight stops. And then I'll come at an L shape and just make a few marks up here, all the way around. And I'm gonna trace along my waistline. For the purposes of the video, I think I'm just gonna switch to black on this mock-up so you could actually see it. It's gonna be a little difficult with the camera for you to be able to see what I'm doing here. So I'll just trace it in black. I'm gonna follow just with a few marks all around the back skirt. And then L-shaped line at the waist. As I come across, I'm gonna follow the outline of the waist all the way to the other side. And then make my L shape here, that 90-degree where the waist meets the center back. And then a few marks all the way down. Okay. And once that's done, usually I go in and I mark where my darts are. So this is my dart. You can actually see my dart here. I'm gonna make a mark right here at the top so I know where my darts are going to be to transfer those. And I like to use a pin. Usually I just use a regular pin. And I stick that pin through the head of my dart. And then I just kind of hold it and I mark, pull my paper back, and I just mark where the head of that pin is to mark where my dart location is going to be. Okay? And I do the same thing for both darts. Just put a pin through it, lift your paper up to transfer, and mark where the head of that pin comes through. Okay, so once we have that, I like to mark where my hip line is on both center back as well as the side seam. And that's pretty much everything that I need in terms of information to transfer from my block or my skirt sloper to my mock-up fabric. So I'm going to remove all of these pattern weights. And now I'm going to move that to the side. And here I want to get my clear see-through ruler and I want to draw in my darts. So I'm going to trace my darts in here. I'm going to trace my dart in here. And then I'm going to also trace my hip line. And then I'm going to go in with my hip curve. And I'm going to draw in my center back. I'm going to draw in center back first. So I'm going to trace that line all the way up, center back line all the way up. Okay, and for my side seam I'm going to use my hip curve. So I'm going to come in, tracing my dotted lines all the way up until I get to my hip line. Okay, and here I'm going to use the curvy part as I move up to the top. Once I make it to the hip line, it's straight, and then it starts to kind of curve. So I'm curving that all the way up to the top of my waist. And I came up just a little bit outside. You can see there, and I can correct that here all the way up to the waist. And what I typically do is just mark with lines to mark that part out to let myself know I'm not going to use that line, but I'm going to use this one so I'm not confused. So then I'm just going to go in to the waist. So you can see my waistline here. I'm going to move that down just a tad, and I'm going to trace the waistline. All the way around until I get to the other side. Okay, and again, so you're not confused, I just typically mark side seam and center back here. Now I'm gonna trace my hem from edge to edge, from this end to that end. And this hem includes a 1-inch hem allowance. Okay, now because this sloper is just a regular block, there is no seam allowance added to it to fit my body or a client's body for that matter. So I have to add seam allowance. And I like to use a 1-inch for testing of the muslin. I probably will do a center back zipper on this one. So I'm gonna add a full inch all the way along my center back. And I'm gonna carry that 1 inch all the way to the top. And I'm just gonna take my waistline. I'm gonna extend that waistline out. And then I'm gonna extend my hemline out and trace that hemline 1 inch seam allowance all the way to the top. And then here, to remind myself, I'm going to put zipper SA zipper seam allowance, okay? And again, if you're doing an invisible zipper, you can get away with, you know, 1/2 inch. But I typically use, with my mock-ups, a full 1 inch. And I'm just gonna put a 1 inch there to remind myself that as well. Now, I'm going to use a 1/2 inch, I'm going to use a 1 inch seam allowance around the entire side seam. So I'm adding seam allowance to the side seam because I want to make sure it fits when I test this mock-up, again on myself or on a client. So I'm going to follow that new line that I started here, and from that line I'm going to go out 1 inch. And I love this see-through ruler because you can see exactly what you're doing without having to move it. You just see right through it. Okay? And I take that all the way to the bottom. And I'm going to come all the way out. Okay? To that 1 inch. And from that 1 inch line, I'm going to connect all my little dots all the way up. And again, you could have chosen a 5/8 of an inch. You could have chosen, you know, 3/8, you know, 5/8, like commercial patterns. It's really a preference, a design preference. But when you're sewing for other people too, and you have fittings, it's better to have more room to play with because you can always take in, can't add to it. Okay? All right, so let's mark hip line here, right? So that should be fitting near the hip line. And then on the waist, I'll probably carry just a 1/2 inch seam allowance up here. I'm gonna follow that 1/2 inch all the way around. All the way to the edge of the side seam. And then I will take the edge of the zipper seam allowance, oops, and bring that up, and then carry the lines of the waistline to connect those. And again, this is just a practice. This is just a mock-up to make sure everything fits the way that I want it to before I turn this into a final pattern. So on this particular one, I'm going to cut 2 pieces of this straight skirt. This is the back, because I will have a center back zipper. And I'll probably just mark down on that center back line about probably 8 inches. About 8 inches. I'll put two lines there. Sorry. From the waistline down, I measured about 8 inches down, because that's going to be my zipper, where my zipper is going to stop there. So from here, I'm going to take my trusty scissors and I'm going to cut along that hem. And then I'm going to cut along the center back. I'm going to make sure you keep that scissors flat to the table to get the best cut. And then here, I'm going to cut up my side seam. Okay, and then I'm going to cut my waistline. And once I have both of my center back pieces, I'm going to sew it together. And I'll be doing the same thing to my front. My front will be cut on the fold. That little front part. That one's a little tricky right there. Okay, so we're going to move all of those scrap pieces to the side. And here is what my center back looks like. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing for the front, and we're going to sew this up. Okay, so going back to the back piece, I've transferred all the markings from the front of the skirt sloper to the back, just for balancing and make sure everything matches. So that's my 1-inch zipper allowance for the center back. That's my hip line and both of the darts, as well as the dart endpoint of where I'll be stopping. I'm gonna do the same thing for the front, and then we're gonna sew up the center back, sewing all the way up to where that zipper stops, and that was at 9 inches. Let me mark that. Same, we're gonna bring that 9-inch from the waistline down so that both sides match. We're gonna sew up the center back, stopping right here, because that's where that zipper is going to go, right here. And sometimes when you're testing a mock-up, you can put the zipper in. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just pin it for fit. Okay, so I have my back piece cut out, 2 pieces. The front is cut on the fold. I have all of my darts marked out on the muslin for the front and the back. I have the hip line marked out. I'm just eyeballing the hem line. Everything seems to be even here. The hip line appears to be even here. So I'm gonna go ahead and stitch my darts, and then I'll be stitching, and usually I just do basting stitches when I'm doing a mock-up. It's easier for fitting if to rip them out and do a smaller seam allowance, or larger if needed. And then once that's done, the darts, I'm gonna go ahead and sew this together, the center back pieces together, again from the bottom all the way up, stopping at the zipper. And then we'll be sewing the front to the back at the side seams. So let's work on those darts. Okay, so here I have my fabric right sides together, and I folded my darts. You can see I've marked out for easy reference. I have my pin at the dart stop point here, and I'm going to stitch. I've also had it pinned with both legs together at the top at the waistline. And then I'm going to stitch from the very top, just doing a basting stitch all the way down. You want to make sure you run off the edge and leave just a little bit of a tail. That's kind of a trick to having a neat dart. So I'm gonna set my Juki. I'm using my HCL F600 machine here. I'm gonna stitch this at the highest stitch length, which is 5. And I'm going to remove this pin and stitch all the way to the edge of the dart at that stopping point. lot easier to see what you're doing when you draw the lines. So I'm going to run off the edge, I'm going to pull that out, and then use my automatic cutter, or you could use your scissors, whatever makes it easier for you. Okay, so that's one. And on the inside, which is the right side of the fabric, you'll see your dart. I'm going to do the same thing for the other dart, since this was cut on the fold, and also the same for the back skirt pieces. Okay, and there's a glimpse of what my darts look like on the back piece. That's the front face fabric, and that's the dart here on the inside of the back. Okay, so this is the wrong side of the fabric. I have right sides together, both of the back pieces. I have the center back pinned from where the zipper stops all the way to the hem. And I'm going to stitch from the hem all the way up to the center back, because this is where the zipper is going to be. And again, you can choose to pin it for the purposes of, you know, your first fitting, your muslin fitting, your first sloper fitting, to test the pattern to see if that size works, and go from there. And I'm just stitching all the way up to where that zipper will stop. I'll just back stitch here. Once I get there, there we go, a couple more stitches. Back stitch. Okay, and at this point, you will be stitching right sides together, the front to the back. So this is where your center zipper is going to be. These are your two back darts on each side, and here's your side seam. Okay, so here I have my side seams pinned, and I have the center back already stitched. Once this is done, at this point you can choose to put in your center zipper, or you can simply just, you know, hold the center back seam allowance, that 1 inch open on each side, to test the fit. So we're going to sew up the side seams and we'll check the fit. Okay guys, so this is the final fit here. This is the basic skirt. This is the front, and I, you know, plan to do a waistband, so it probably would sit about here. I did do some adjustments once I did sew the front to the back at the side seams. I did an extra 1 inch on added to the sloper. I probably only needed a 1/2 inch. So with a 1/2 inch added to my side seams as well as to the top, this is the fit. So this is the front. That's my side seam. So my side seam, remember this is a straight skirt, right? It's like a big square. That's straight. It's not tapered. It's not A-line. That's the back. I think my side seam, it's pretty straight here. So if I pinch just a tad bit here to simulate what my waist would look like with the waistband, right? I think I'm pleased. So with the tapered or penciled skirt, you know, you would probably come in, depends on your liking. I mean, if you wanted to hug your hips, you could. But if you want it, you know, kind of semi-fitted, you could come in like another 1/2 inch, you know, on each side of that side seam. Or, you know, the A-line, usually I take it out about probably 2 inches, you know, extend it out from the straight pattern. But I'm pleased. So those are my darts, you know, they're straight. Those are my back darts, and of course this is where your zipper would be. I just have it simulated pinned for ease of fitting. So I could either, if I'm sewing this for someone else, usually I would pad my dress form to their measurements and would try it on after I've adjusted that sloper pattern, the pattern, and test the fit. So that's basically how you sew a basic skirt, and hopefully that was helpful in some way, showing you how to do those darts. I did not do a zipper with this one, probably another video that's not as long to show putting the zipper in on the real skirt. And I may decide once I choose the final fabric. Sometimes I just do mock-ups, not really certain what fabric I'm gonna go with, and today's one of those days. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the video. This is Larilyn with House of Akoti Design. Please like, share, and subscribe. This is a relatively new channel. I haven't been on YouTube for years. I think it's been about 2.5 to 3 years now. But please like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on other social media channels. I'm also on Instagram at House of Akoti, TikTok, House of Akoti Design, and Facebook, House of Akoti Design and Gifts. Thank you for watching. See you next time.